In this video, we want to look at the heroes of Israel in 1948, when the nation was reborn as a modern state. So, in 1948, May 14, 1948, the State of Israel is born was the headline of the Palestine Post. 2,700 years earlier, Isaiah the prophet, through divine inspiration, asked the question, can a nation be born in a day? And Israel was literally born in a day in 1948, thanks to the amazing courage, the brilliance of its leaders at that time. We'll be looking at 3 unsung heroes who each played a part in the rebirth of the nation, and we'll see how, I believe, God's promises were combined with the efforts of these heroic young men and women to bring about the purposes of God in the rebirth of the State of Israel. So let's have a look at these 3 heroes. The first one is Golda Meir. Many of you may know of her as Israel's first Prime Minister. However, before that time, in 1948, she was part of the inner circle of the emerging government for Israel. Now, Israel desperately needed funds, as they knew there would be 5 modern, well-equipped Arab armies coming against her the moment she declared independence. They had a few guns, they had a ragtag army, but they knew it was nothing to stand against tanks, against planes, and they needed funds, and they needed it desperately. At least $25 million was needed, but estimates were that the US Jewish community would only be able to raise $5 million at the most. They were stretched with all kinds of other commitments. They were a bit tired of all the appeals from the Jews in Palestine for more funds. They were busy with hospitals, with schools in the US, and it looked really hard to get more funds out of them. And the enthusiasm was just not there. But Golda put up her hand and volunteered to go. And so, 2 days later, she found herself on a ship to New York. She arrived just with $10 in her pocket, just with the clothes she was wearing at the time, and her task was to find the missing millions. There was an audience of key Jewish leaders gathering in Chicago at the time, just as she arrived, and so she went to speak to this audience, but this audience was not necessarily enthusiastic about her message, and many of them were in fact opposed to her Zionist ideals. Some people were warning her, don't speak to this audience, it'll be too tough. But she persevered, so I have to speak to this group of Jewish leaders. She told them that there is a battle coming, there is a fight, and it's not your fight, it is our fight in the land that was promised to our forefathers. 700,000 Jews may die, as well as a dream of statehood forever. And she challenged them, saying, will you support us? And will you support us immediately? She explained that the finances could not wait. It could not wait for next month, for next year. The finances were needed immediately to ensure the survival of this dream of a Jewish state. When she finished giving her speech, the room turned quiet, and it looked as if she had failed. But then the whole assembly stood up, gave her a thunderous applause, and while people were applauding, others were running out the back, getting a phone and taking out loans from their personal bankers in their own personal names to make donations. And that night Golda raised $1 million. She ended up taking a few weeks in the US, traveling and raising $50 million, twice the amount that was estimated needed, 10 times the amount that it was thought she'll be able to get at all. In comparison, this was 3 times the entire revenue of Saudi Arabia from oil in 1948. So it was a considerable sum that would be crucial for the war effort. Ben-Gurion proudly declared when she came back, he said, the day when history is written, it will be recorded it was thanks to a Jewish woman that the Jewish state was born. Now, apart from Golda, let's have a look at 2 other individuals who are less known than her. Chaim Slavin an engineering genius. Now, there's not much information about him out on the internet, but he is an amazing man that we really need to know his story. He was the director of the Palestine power plant by day, but at night he was Israel's mad scientist, making explosives in his home kitchen. He discovered that the US was converting to scrap metal parts of its armament industry. World War II had ended, and the US didn't need all its machinery to produce all these weapons, and so they were shutting them down. They were converting it to scrap metal and scattering it across the country because they didn't want foreign powers to pick it up or to use it. So Haim went to the US with the support of the Jewish Agency. He pretended to be deaf and dumb so that his accent wouldn't give him away. He shut himself off in a room where he found some technical magazines with photos of the kind of equipment he was looking for, and he then put to memory all the parts, all the pieces that would be needed just by looking at the photos of the machinery. And then he assembled a team to scour the scrap metal yards all over the US looking for those pieces and sending them all back to New York. There he assembled machinery capable of a daily production of 50,000 bullets, and assembly line production of machine guns requiring 1,500 operations. Amazingly complicated, and what a success. But how was he to import it to Israel? How was he to get it past the British blockade? It was one thing to smuggle a few guns past the British soldiers, but how are you going to smuggle such machinery right under their noses? So Haim disassembled everything, down to the last nut, screw and bolt, and he marked every single piece with a unique code that he himself invented. Then he scrambled it all together in an unrecognizable way and put it in crates, and he sent it as agricultural equipment to kibbutzes all over Israel. And then he went to Israel and he reassembled the 75,000 pieces of machinery in Israel. And by the end of this, he could boast that not one nut, not one bolt, not one screw or washer was missing. I just think this is amazing, the genius of this man, and I believe ultimately the God-given genius of this man, to be able to supply the weapons that were needed to defend the state of Israel at its birth. Now, having looked at these two heroes, we're now going to turn to a young lady called Esther Kallengold. She was one of over 45,000 foreign volunteers who came to help the Jewish people. Some came who were non-Jews, others were Jews like Esther, and she came to help her people in time of need. She was a 23-year-old British nurse, and she was trapped in the old city with a small ragtag band of fighters who were ill-equipped, ill-prepared for the battle surrounding them. They were cut off from the rest of the fighters in Jerusalem. They were surrounded by the Arabs, barely getting any supplies, and she was running supplies between the different fighters and even herself picking up a gun from time to time. But then an explosion happened just near her, and a building collapsed behind her, and her back was horribly wounded, and she found herself mortally wounded in hospital. And a few days before she passed away, she wrote a letter. This is what she wrote. Dear Mummy and Daddy, we had a difficult fight. I have tasted hell, but it has been worthwhile because I am convinced that we will see a Jewish state. I hope one day soon you will all come and enjoy the fruits of that for which we are fighting. Remember me only in happiness. Shalom, Esther. And a few days later she passed away. She and many others paid the ultimate price for the land of Israel. In fact, 6,300 Israelis paid this price. That was about 1% of the population at the time. It was Israel's costliest war. But she and others like her showed determination, showed courage, showed heroism to fight for what they believed in, to fight for this land, and to be willing to lay down their lives for it to become a reality. You know, I believe God has given promises, but He is looking for people who have the same kind of spirit, that are willing to lay down everything in order that the promise might come to pass. And so she is a hero to this day. Through their efforts, the nation was born in a day, through these 3 heroes and many other like them. And God's promises, combined with the all-out efforts of the Jewish people, led to the rebirth of the nation, as foretold 2,700 years ago by Isaiah. They were born in a day.